You think you know who's watching, but you don't. Not yet. Olivia Ramirez's hands trembled as she wiped down the counter at Daybreak Diner, a modest family-run restaurant on the east side of Austin, Texas. Just minutes ago, she had served a man whom she had assumed was merely another customer, but when their eyes met, an inexplicable heaviness filled the air. Was he simply a regular diner guest, or was something far bigger at play? And the real twist was this: the man wasn't just any customer. He seemed to hold the key to everything she was about to lose. Olivia, 27, had spent nearly 3 years working at Daybreak Diner. Though it wasn't fancy by any means, a small eatery nestled between a convenience store and a laundromat, it had become her second home. In this humble establishment where truck drivers stopped for strong coffee, families gathered for hearty Sunday breakfasts, and the staff learned orders before they even learned names, Olivia had found purpose. The hours were long, the tips were meager, and management rarely cared about the struggles of those who worked there. Yet Olivia stayed because she had bills to pay. Her rent on a cramped one-bedroom apartment in East Austin was sky high, and her younger brother Marco was in his second year at college, relying on her secret contributions for textbooks and groceries. She never told Marco the full extent of her sacrifices. Instead, she simply sent a little extra whenever she could. That's why she worked double shifts, why she tolerated rude customers and dismissive co-workers. Because kindness and hard work were all she had to offer, and she believed that doing the right thing was its own reward. Olivia had seen enough in those years to know that Daybreak Diner wasn't a place where fairness was guaranteed. She'd watched Carla, a senior waitress with a smug air, treat certain customers as if they were invisible, while laughing flirtatiously with others. She'd seen Darren, a newer server, deliberately avoid serving tables that didn't fit an unspoken standard. The diner's energy would shift inexplicably, favoring well-dressed businessmen who received smiles and courteous conversation, while working-class patrons in worn uniforms were given rushed, curt service, and if someone even hinted they might not tip well, some staff would barely acknowledge them at all. Olivia hated that injustice with every fiber of her being, but speaking out had never been an option. A few months ago, after casually remarking that a table had been left waiting too long, Carla had glared at her and whispered, "You don't get paid extra for being a saint, Olivia." That was the lesson. Either join the silent complicity or learn to keep your mouth shut. Until that fateful night, until everything changed. It was a slow Wednesday evening. The dinner rush had ebbed away, leaving Daybreak Diner quiet except for the soft hum of the radio and the clink of utensils on chipped porcelain. Olivia was behind the counter, meticulously refilling the sugar dispensers, when the bell above the door jingled. An older man in a clean, slightly worn button-up shirt and khakis walked in. He exuded quiet confidence, but as he scanned the room, a subtle hesitation betrayed him. Olivia recognized that look, a look she'd seen on patrons who already knew exactly what kind of welcome they were, or were not, about to receive. Sure enough, the response from the rest of the staff was immediate. Carla leaned against the counter without looking up from her phone. Darren stole a quick glance before resuming his conversation with a fellow server, and even Mr. Thompson, the no-nonsense manager, peeked out of his office for just a second. There was no friendly greeting, no acknowledgement, only a heavy silence. Olivia felt the weight of the unspoken decision pressing down on her. This wasn't an accident. Her co-workers had chosen in that brief moment to send a message. For a moment she considered doing what was easiest, keeping her head down, staying silent. But then her eyes flicked back to the man. He stood there, his posture open, almost challenging the staff to prove him wrong, just this once. Taking a deep breath, Olivia squared her shoulders, grabbed a menu from behind the counter and walked straight over to his table. "Good evening, sir," she said warmly, though her voice was steady and casual. "Can I help you tonight?" The man looked up, and for a split second, his expression softened. "Yes, ma'am," he replied in a low, measured tone. "I'll have just you tonight." His reply made Olivia's heart flutter with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. She quickly guided him to an open booth near the window. "Follow me." "Will this booth work for you?" she asked. "Perfect," he said simply, as he settled into the booth with a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with the icy reception from the rest of the staff. Olivia handed him a menu and, discreetly, pulled a pen from behind her ear. "Can I start you off with something to drink? Perhaps a cup of coffee?" "Coffee, black," he replied. "That would be excellent." Olivia moved swiftly to fetch a fresh pot of coffee. She could feel the scrutinizing eyes of Carla and Darren on her back, but she refused to let their judgment sway her. As she carefully poured the steaming coffee into a ceramic cup, the man glanced up and spoke softly. "You're the only one working tonight who seems to understand what this place should be." Olivia felt a flicker of pride mixed with anxiety. She had always prided herself on doing her job with integrity, even when it meant going against the prevailing culture. "I believe in doing my best," she murmured, avoiding eye contact with the others. The man smiled, a slow, appreciative smile that made her heart beat faster. "Thank you," he said quietly. But as the evening wore on, the atmosphere in Daybreak Diner shifted from a quiet moment of connection to a prelude of chaos. After closing time, as Olivia was locking up, Mr. Thompson appeared from the back office. His tone was flat and unsympathetic. "Olivia, I need to speak with you," he said. There was no hint of the warmth she'd once known from him, only cold bureaucracy. They stepped into a cramped, poorly lit office filled with stacks of paperwork and old coffee stains on the desk. Mr. Thompson wasted no time. "You've been here almost 3 years. You've never missed a shift, never been late," he began, his voice devoid of empathy. "Yet last night, I've been informed that your actions, treating one customer with more respect than the rest, have upset the balance here. That decision has consequences." Olivia's heart sank. I was only doing my job," she protested softly. "I treat everyone the same, sir." Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Sometimes, treating people differently is part of running a business," he snapped. "Your actions have cost us, Olivia. I'm afraid we have no choice." His words hit like a blow. Olivia's mind raced. She had given her all to this diner, working double shifts to support her rent and help her younger brother Marco with his college expenses, and now she was being punished for simply being kind. "You're firing me?" she asked, voice trembling. Mr. Thompson's reply was curt. "Yes, effective immediately. Please collect your things and report to Human Resources." Olivia's stomach twisted with disbelief and a deep, aching sense of betrayal. Without a word, she gathered her apron and personal belongings. As she walked through the dining area, she could feel the stares of Carla, Darren, and even the few remaining customers. Their eyes carried a mix of pity and satisfaction. Outside, the cool night air hit her face like a harsh reminder that nothing would ever be the same. That same morning, as Olivia sat in her car outside Daybreak Diner, a modest hatchback with more miles on it than she cared to count, her phone buzzed with a new message. The screen displayed an unknown number. With a racing heart and hesitant fingers, she answered. "Hello?" A deep, steady voice came through. "Olivia, this is Ryan Mitchell." Olivia's breath caught. "Ryan Mitchell," she repeated, not quite believing it. "Yes," the voice continued. "I've been following the events at Daybreak Diner. I know what happened, and I want you to know that I believe in what you did." There was a pause. "I'm the owner of Daybreak Diner," Ryan added, "and I'm calling because I want you to come back. I fired you on purpose to see if you'd stand by your principles, and you did. I need someone with your integrity to manage my diner." Olivia's mind swirled with disbelief and a cautious glimmer of hope. The idea that the owner himself was calling her back made her heart flutter with possibilities. "You're offering me a job?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Absolutely," Ryan said firmly. "You treated one customer with the respect and kindness that this diner should be known for. I believe you can bring change here, and I want you to lead that change as the new manager." In that moment, as the rain pounded softly on her car roof and the early morning light began to creep over the horizon, Olivia felt the weight of her struggles begin to lift. With trembling hands, she agreed. "I'll do it," she said, determination emerging in her voice. "I'll come back." Thus began a new chapter in Olivia Ramirez's life. The next morning she returned to Daybreak Diner, not as a waitress but as the new manager, a position that carried both responsibility and the promise of change. As she stepped through the door, she could almost hear the echoes of every long, difficult day she'd spent scrubbing counters and enduring the judgment of her co-workers. But now, her arrival was met with a mix of shock, envy, and quiet admiration. Carla and Darren exchanged uneasy glances, and even Mr. Thompson's once commanding presence had dwindled in the wake of Ryan Mitchell's decisive intervention. Over the following weeks, Olivia set to work transforming Daybreak Diner into a place that honored the values she'd always believed in: fairness, respect, and genuine human connection. She revised the scheduling so that every employee was treated equally, regardless of their background or appearance. She instituted training sessions that emphasized customer service and dignity, and she listened carefully to the concerns of her staff, something no one had bothered to do before. Slowly, the energy of the diner began to shift. Regular customers noticed the difference. Families who had once received curt service were now greeted with warm smiles, and the atmosphere grew lighter, as if the heavy cloud of favoritism and discrimination had finally lifted. At first, the change wasn't without resistance. Carla, who had long enjoyed the power that came with selective kindness, muttered under her breath as she observed Olivia's new policies. Darren, too, seemed conflicted, his eyes darting nervously whenever Olivia passed by. Yet, as days turned into weeks, even the skeptics began to see the benefits of a workplace that valued everyone equally. Sales increased as word spread that Daybreak Diner was a place where everyone was treated with respect, and the reviews online shifted from scathing to heartfelt. Olivia's message resonated with a new generation of diners, young people and families alike, who craved authenticity in every interaction. News of the diner's transformation spread quickly on social media. A viral tweet by a local blogger read, "Daybreak Diner isn't just about greasy food, it's about real people, real respect." Shout out to Olivia Ramirez for showing us that integrity still matters. The tweet was shared thousands of times, and soon the story was featured on local television, sparking a movement among service workers across the US, who saw in Olivia's rise a glimmer of hope that one's character could indeed change the world. Despite the accolades and the newfound respect, Olivia never forgot the hardships that had nearly broken her spirit. Late one morning, as she sat at a small table in her modest apartment, a place decorated with faded family photos and handwritten notes of encouragement, her phone buzzed with a message from her younger brother Marco. "Sis, I'm so proud of you. You're a true inspiration." Tears welled in her eyes as she replied with a quiet thank you, knowing that every sacrifice, every long shift at the diner, had been for the sake of her family's future. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell, the owner who had orchestrated Olivia's return, watched the transformation with satisfaction. In a press conference held at a sleek, modern venue in downtown Austin, he spoke to reporters about the importance of integrity and leadership in business. "We often think that success is measured by numbers and profit margins," he said, his tone calm and measured, "but true success lies in the impact we have on our communities." Olivia Ramirez has shown us that when we treat people with kindness and fairness, we create an environment where everyone can thrive. His words resonated with a national audience, particularly with young people who were increasingly disillusioned by corporate greed and elitism. As autumn deepened and the crisp Texas air turned cooler, Daybreak Diner continued to flourish under Olivia's leadership. She introduced new menu items that combined classic comfort food with a modern twist, organized community nights where local musicians and poets were invited to perform, and even established a mentorship program for aspiring young service workers. In every decision, she remained true to the values that had guided her from the very beginning: work hard, treat people with respect, and never let anyone's prejudices define your worth. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped low over the skyline of Austin, Olivia stood outside Daybreak Diner, watching as families and friends laughed together over plates of food. The neon sign above the door glowed softly, a beacon of hope in a sometimes harsh world. She recalled the fateful night when an older man's decision had cost her everything, and how, just one day later, a phone call from Ryan Mitchell had offered her a second chance. That memory was both painful and profoundly beautiful, a reminder that even in moments of darkness, a single act of compassion could spark a revolution of change. At the same time, across town, Marco was thriving in college, buoyed by the secret support he'd received from Olivia. He excelled in his studies, and his friends admired him not only for his academic achievements, but also for his humble background. A background that now, thanks to his sister's unwavering integrity, was becoming a badge of honor. Marco often sent her texts full of gratitude and encouragement, telling her that her strength was inspiring him every day. Back at Daybreak Diner, the changes continued to ripple outward. Former employees who had once resigned in frustration began to return, drawn by the promise of a fair and supportive workplace. New faces joined the team, eager to work in an environment where kindness was rewarded rather than punished. The transformation of the diner became a case study in ethical leadership, discussed in local business forums and even featured in university lectures about social responsibility in the service industry. One evening, during a community dinner held at the diner to celebrate its first anniversary under Olivia's management, the atmosphere was electric with hope and unity. As the guests gathered around long, rustic tables adorned with simple centerpieces of wildflowers, Olivia took a moment to address the crowd. "I know that this place has seen its share of hardship," she began, her voice clear and resolute. For years, Daybreak Diner was just a place to grab a bite, where not everyone was treated equally. But tonight we celebrate a new beginning, a place where every person is valued and every act of kindness is recognized. The room burst into applause, and Olivia's eyes shone with unshed tears. In that moment, the diner wasn't just a restaurant. It was a living testament to the power of integrity and compassion. Across the country, social media buzzed with hashtags like Daybreak Difference and Kindness Matters, as young people shared their own stories of workplace injustice and the small acts that had changed their lives. Videos and testimonials poured in, and Olivia found herself invited to speak at conferences and community events, where her message of resilience and hope resonated deeply, with audiences hungry for authenticity in a fast-pacing world. For Ryan Mitchell, witnessing the success of Daybreak Diner under Olivia's leadership reinforced his belief in a new way of doing business, a way that prioritized people over profit. In interviews, he often recounted the story of the day he decided to fire Olivia as a test, only to have her stand by her values and emerge stronger than ever. It wasn't about the money, he would say. It was about respect, and when you treat people right, they repay you in ways you never imagined. His own company, Blackwell Innovations, began to shift its focus toward more ethical practices and community engagement initiatives, inspired by the transformative changes at the diner. As winter gave way to spring, Daybreak Diner and its legacy continued to expand. Olivia spearheaded a partnership with local non-profits to provide job training and scholarships for young people in the service industry, while also establishing an employee wellness program that emphasized mental health, fairness, and respect. The diner's modest charm, once marred by favoritism and indifference, now shone as a beacon of community spirit and ethical values. Regular customers, from truckers to families, noticed the difference, and their loyalty grew stronger. Even those who had once been overlooked were now treated with the dignity they deserved. One crisp spring afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the large front windows of Daybreak Diner, Olivia stood behind the counter, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The gentle clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversation, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee all blended together into a symphony of hope, a stark contrast to the harsh realities of just a year ago. She thought about the fateful encounter with the older man, the call from Ryan Mitchell, and the courageous decision she had made that morning to stand by her principles. Every hardship, every tear shed in silence, had paved the way for this moment, a moment when integrity was celebrated and the human spirit was uplifted. At the same time, Marco sent her another message. "Sis, you're amazing. I'm so proud of you." His words, simple yet powerful, reminded Olivia that every sacrifice had been worth it. As she smiled at his message, she felt a renewed determination to keep fighting for what was right, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. Days turned into weeks, and soon the story of Daybreak Diner became a local legend. Young people across Austin began to speak about the transformation at the diner, and many shared their own experiences of workplace injustice and the power of a single kind act to change a life. Community leaders invited Olivia to join roundtable discussions on improving service industries, and her example inspired a wave of similar reforms in restaurants across the city. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell continued to support Olivia behind the scenes, offering guidance and resources whenever needed. His decision to hire her as manager became emblematic of a new era in which leaders recognized that success wasn't measured solely by numbers, but by the positive impact they had on their communities. His own public speeches began to include stories of Daybreak Diner's turnaround, and he often cited Olivia's journey as proof that empathy and integrity were the cornerstones of success. As summer arrived, the warm, balmy nights in Austin were filled with celebrations. One particularly memorable evening, the diner hosted a community picnic in its modest parking lot. String lights were hung between trees, and local bands played softly as families and friends gathered to share food, stories, and laughter. Olivia walked among the crowd, greeting every customer with a genuine smile. The atmosphere was electric, a living demonstration that even the most ordinary place could become extraordinary through simple acts of kindness. During the event, a local reporter approached Olivia. "What do you think made the biggest difference in turning things around at Daybreak Diner?" the reporter asked, microphone in hand. Olivia paused, her eyes reflecting the joy of the moment, and replied, "It all started with one act of respect. I treated every customer with the dignity I believed they deserved, and in doing so, I found the strength to stand by my values, even when it wasn't easy. And that one small act rippled out, changing not just my life, but the entire culture of this diner." The reporter nodded, clearly moved by her words, and the story soon made headlines, further cementing the diner's reputation as a symbol of hope and integrity. In the following months, Olivia's influence spread well beyond Daybreak Diner. She was invited to speak at colleges, inspiring students to pursue careers with empathy and ethics. Her story was featured in podcasts and online videos where she explained that the true measure of a person isn't how they're treated by the powerful, but how they treat those who are often overlooked. "We all have the power to change the world," she would say, one act of kindness at a time. Back at Daybreak Diner, the work continued. Olivia restructured the operations so that every employee was given equal opportunities for advancement. She implemented training programs focused on customer service and mutual respect. And gradually, even Carla and Darren began to change their ways. Mr. Thompson, who had once ruled with an iron fist, was replaced by a new manager hired by Ryan Mitchell, someone who shared Olivia's vision for fairness. The transformation wasn't instantaneous, but it was steady, much like the rising sun that gave the diner its name. One quiet evening, as the neon lights of Austin twinkled against the twilight sky, Olivia sat at the counter, quietly reviewing the day's sales and feedback. The familiar chime of the door announced the arrival of a customer. A middle-aged man in a worn leather jacket and faded jeans walked in, hesitating at the threshold. Olivia greeted him warmly. "Welcome to Daybreak Diner. What can I get for you today?" The man smiled faintly, his eyes lingering on the friendly atmosphere. As he ordered, Olivia couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. A reminder that every person who walked through the door was now treated with dignity, regardless of how they looked or where they came from. Later that night, as Olivia locked up the diner, she paused to look back at the warmly lit building. The soft glow of the sign, the gentle murmur of conversations echoing from within, and the thought of all the lives being touched filled her with a deep sense of fulfillment. She recalled the many hardships she had endured and the sacrifices she had made for her family. In that reflective moment, she smiled and whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell sat in his downtown office, reviewing reports on the diner's performance. The numbers had soared since Olivia had taken over, but more importantly, customer satisfaction ratings were at an all-time high. In his next board meeting, he passionately advocated for similar reforms in all of his establishments, citing Daybreak Diner's transformation as proof that ethical leadership could yield tremendous results. "When you treat people with respect, success follows naturally," he declared, his voice confident and clear. His colleagues, many of whom were young and eager for change, applauded his vision, and the momentum of a kinder business model began to spread throughout the company. As the seasons changed, the story of Daybreak Diner continued to grow. Social media campaigns celebrated the Daybreak difference, and local news segments featured interviews with customers whose lives had been brightened by the diner's new culture. Olivia, now a beloved figure in her community, became a mentor for other service workers, encouraging them to stand up for themselves and fight for fairness in their workplaces. One memorable spring day, as cherry blossoms bloomed along the sidewalks of East Austin and the warm breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee, Olivia received an invitation to speak at a local high school. Standing before a crowd of eager teenagers, she recounted her journey from the struggles of working at a diner to becoming a leader who transformed her workplace. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change the course of a life, she told the students, her eyes shining with sincerity. If you believe in yourself and treat others with respect, you can overcome any obstacle. The students erupted in applause, many inspired by her story and the promise that they too could forge a future defined by integrity and compassion. Back at Daybreak Diner, business thrived like never before. Olivia introduced community nights where local musicians performed live and customers were invited to share their own stories of resilience and hope. The diner became a gathering place not just for food, but for connection, a safe haven in a bustling city. Regular patrons spoke of how the change in atmosphere made them feel seen and valued, and the ripple effects of this transformation reached far beyond the diner's walls. In a quiet reflection on a cool summer evening, Olivia sat on the steps outside the diner, watching as families strolled by and friends gathered for dinner. The neon lights of Daybreak Diner cast a gentle glow on the pavement, and the distant hum of traffic blended with the soft chatter of the neighborhood. She thought back to the night when everything had changed, a night when one act of integrity had cost her everything, only to return and give her a chance at something new. I was almost thrown away like trash, she mused quietly. But now I'm here, and I'm not going to let anyone else lose hope. Her resolve was firm, and the lessons of those difficult days had become the foundation of her future. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell, ever the visionary, continued to expand his philanthropic initiatives. He launched scholarship programs for underprivileged youth, supported local food banks, and even set up a mentorship network for service workers across Austin. His belief in the power of kindness and ethical leadership resonated with a growing number of young professionals, and his public statements began to shift the corporate culture in his industry. It's not about how much you earn, he would say, it's about how much you give back. And every little act of goodness adds up to something extraordinary. Months later, as summer turned to autumn and the crisp air of Texas began to cool, Daybreak Diner hosted its annual community celebration. The event, held in the parking lot adorned with string lights and hay bales, brought together people from all walks of life: truckers, families, students, and even local business owners. Olivia took the stage, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "Tonight we celebrate more than just a restaurant," she declared. "We celebrate the idea that every act of kindness, every moment when you stand up for what's right, creates ripples of change that can transform lives." The audience cheered, and in that moment, the spirit of Daybreak Diner shone as a testament to the enduring power of compassion. The story of Olivia's transformation and the remarkable turnaround at Daybreak Diner continued to inspire far and wide. Local newspapers featured long articles about the diner revolution, and social media buzzed with testimonials from those whose lives had been touched by the new culture of respect and fairness. Young people across the country began to share their own experiences of workplace injustice, and many credited Olivia's courage with inspiring them to stand up for themselves. As the year drew to a close, Olivia's journey had become a living legacy. On a cool winter evening, as the streets of East Austin shimmered under a light dusting of frost and the soft glow of streetlights illuminated the night, Olivia walked out of Daybreak Diner with a sense of quiet triumph. The hardships of the past no longer defined her. They had with every challenge overcome and every moment of genuine connection, she had forged a future that was built on integrity, resilience, and hope. In a final act of reflection, Olivia sat in her modest apartment later that night, surrounded by the mementos of her journey. A faded photo of her family, a handwritten note from Marco praising her strength, and a small certificate from a community leadership seminar. As she scrolled through her phone, she read messages from colleagues and strangers alike, each sharing how her story had inspired them to believe that kindness always matters. "Keep your head up, Olivia," one message read. You're proof that even in the darkest times, the smallest light can shine the brightest." Smiling softly through her tears, she typed a response, promising to continue fighting for what was right, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in a fairer world. And so, as the neon lights of Austin flickered against the night sky and the city continued its ceaseless rhythm of change and hope, Olivia Ramirez, once a humble waitress at Daybreak Diner, had become a beacon for those who valued integrity over indifference. Her journey, marked by heartbreak and hardship but defined by relentless compassion, proved that even when you think you know who's watching, sometimes the ones who truly matter are the ones you least expect. In every plate served, every kind word exchanged, and every new opportunity created by that one fateful act of respect, the legacy of Daybreak Diner and the transformative power of doing the right thing continued to inspire a generation.